Hello to all my viewers. How was your week? I hope all is going well. Well, I'm here to bring you the 8th episode of What If Naruto Was from the Uchiha clan. Remember that I'll be uploading this fanfic little by little since it's my own creation, and the previous chapters are on my channel. Without further ado, I'll let you enjoy it.
Combatant booth. Narumi stood at the rail, her eyes glancing around the stadium frantically in search for the sight of her wayward brother. Not having any success with the search, a frown came across her face as she tightened her grip around the railing. Narumi wanted nothing more to show Naruto just how strong she had become, more than even Kushina could even imagine, but it would seem that Naruto had other plans. Even if Naruto was late, she just couldn't believe that he would miss his match, especially consider who his opponent was meant to be. She believed her brother would show up. Narumi sighed and smiled sadly at Naomi, who knew exactly what she was thinking. Sasuke too took notice of Naruto's uncharacteristic absence, but unlike the sorrow Narumi felt, he was feeling even more arrogant than he was moments ago. Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest and closed his eyes with a victorious smirk on his face. I knew that loser wouldn't show up to fight me. The power I gained was meant to kill that man. It would surely be enough to kill that loser. Hokage's son or not, I am still an Uchiha. Sasuke assured himself, ignoring the fact that Ino was trying to hang from his arm, seeing as how her longtime rival was finally out of the picture. With one last look out for her brother, Narumi relented on her search and hopped down onto the field at the proctor's behest. She channeled some chakra into her ears to tune out the arrogant ramble of the Odo shinobi. Not that he noticed. When Narumi caught the proctor's questioning glance, she killed the chakra filling her ears and nodded her head slightly. The proctor had an amused smile on her face, knowing just what Narumi had done, but said nothing. The first match of Bracket 3 begins now, the proctor exclaimed, getting a roar of approval from the anxious crowd. Zaku couldn't help the cocky grin cross his face when he finally got to face his opponent in the tournament. What Zaku was looking at was nothing more than a spoiled princess that would be an easy win. Zaku started to laugh rather boisterously, with a firm shake of his head, getting Narumi to tilt her head in confusion. I can't believe this. They gave me one of the princesses to fight. Well, who am I to spit in the face of a gift? I hope you are ready to lose, girly. Zaku shouted with a dark grin on his face. Why are most guys just like you? They are idiots with superiority complexes that usually die early because they overestimate themselves. Where have all the real men gone? I mean, look at you. Nothing special. Narumi said almost disappointedly, with a small noise of disapproval. The entire crowd went, ooh, at the rather stinging insult directed to the raven-haired shinobi from Odogekure. Zaku went red-faced in anger at the kunoichi's insults, but couldn't come up with an intelligent response of his own. Snarling viciously, Zaku opened his palms, displaying two small black holes in the middle of both of his palms. I does see why it matters for a self-righteous bitch like yourself who is about to be dead. Say goodbye. Zaku shouted with anger as he started to channel the chakra through the tubes in his arms that were implanted into him by Orochimaru to try and create something akin to a living puppet. Narumi narrowed her eyes. A faint blue glow started to take shape inside of the black pits in the middle of his palms. Wind release. Decapitating airwaves. The gathered chakra burst from the holes in his palms, thrusting forth a sharp wind wave that forced Narumi to retreat as the wind slammed down in front of her, cutting into the ground. This is ridiculous. The attacks aren't all that strong, it is just the number of them that are keeping me from closing in on him. Narumi assessed the situation, continuing to avoid the airwaves that the Odo teen was blasting out while cackling manically. There was a pause in the waves coming at her. Taking that chance, Narumi raced forward, hoping to score a few meaningful blows during the pause. It turned out to be a mistake because just before Narumi could reach Zaku, the blue in has increased to be twice as large. I won't be able to dodge that in time. Ninja art. Shield main. Wind release. Severe decapitating airwaves. With his triumphant call, a much larger and faster wave of wind blasted towards an incoming Narumi. Just as it looked like the deadly wind was about to cut Narumi up, her blonde hair wrapped around her, protecting her from the deadly impact behind the wind technique. Zaku gnashed down on his teeth, seeing the Kanehegakure kunoichi protecting herself from his most lethal attack. Narumi released the technique, silently thanking her perverted godfather for teaching her a few of the hair techniques he had developed over the years. Letting her face come back into play, Narumi sent Zaku an eerie grin as she raced forward again. Zaku's eyes closed in pain as his jaw snapped back behind the surprising strength in Narumi's uppercut blow. Despite managing to stay on his feet, Zaku lurched forward when there was a sudden impact in his gut. Looking up for Narumi with clear alarm on his once cocky face, Zaku cursed out loud, not finding anything. Narumi, already on the boy's left, brought down the point of her elbow on the back of his head, making him crumble down onto the ground. You thought I was a weak little girl, but in reality the one who was weak was you. You couldn't even force me to use an elemental jutsu, Narumi said, looking down at Zaku with a frown before sighing and putting a more comfortable smile on her face as she waved at the cheering crowd. Winner by knockout, Narumi Namikaze Uzumaki. The proctor shouted out under the clapping and cheers. In the stands, a large man with a mane of white hair was standing against the wall in the very upper ring of the stadium with a large grin on his face. That a girl. I knew keeping your hair long would work out for you. Jiraiya praised one of his protégés with a giant grin on his face. If the white-haired hermit had it his way, he would be doing his research, but Minato pretty much threatening to use him as practice for the Flying Thunder God made Jiraiya agree to hang around for security purposes. Damn, that blonde-haired student of his was a persuasive one. Sakura just got down clapping for her teammate in her seat near the jounin from Konohagakure. Or she was clapping as well as one could do with one arm in a full cast. Once Narumi had left the field, Sakura turned to face her female sensei with a curious expression in play. Kushina-sensei, how did Narumi do that with her hair? Sakura then subconsciously ran her uninjured hand through her pink hair, thinking about the technique. Kushina, who had been cheering enthusiastically for her daughter, turned to her injured student with a proud smile. That's an easy one, Sakura. Narumi's godfather invented a number of techniques using chakra and hair. That is why both Naomi and Narumi keep their hair long. Asuma took the dying cigarette and snuffed it out on the arm of the chair and moved to place another cigarette between his lips, getting a disapproving frown from Kurenai. Asuma looked over across the way to see a hesitant Choji being chewed out for being afraid to get his hands dirty, while Shikamaru was shaking his head, probably muttering a troublesome. I can see one way that Choji can win this thing. How is that, Asuma-sensei? Kiba asked, really hoping that Choji would kick some serious ass out there. If his opponent makes the one mistake you don't make around any Akimichi. Combat field. Fenri versus Choji Akimichi. Begin. With the proctor moving out of the way, the boy with red scarf from Taki looked at his opponent and he couldn't be any more underwhelmed. The boy took the end of his scarf and wrapped it around his neck tighter in preparation for what he presumed to be a quick and decisive battle between he and the Akimichi heir. Choji was feeling incredibly nervous, never before having so many pairs of eyes observing every move he made. The nerves were so great that Choji couldn't even find it within him to reach down into his bag of chips for a snack. You don't look so tough. As matter of fact, you seem to care more about your next meal than this tournament, fatty. And that was the mistake he couldn't make. As if a metaphorical switch was flipped, the once timid eyes of the husky genin from the hidden leaf become two raging infernos burning with determination to prove that he was not fat but simply big-boned. If Choji could see Lee at the moment, he would see him cheering on his comrade with a similar look in his eyes. Choji took the bag of chips and emptied it into his open mouth. Crumpling the bag and tossing it away, Choji slapped his cheeks, getting a little color in them, as well as getting a more focused look. I am not fat, I am chubby. Choji shouted passionately before dropping into a fighting stance while gathering up his physical energy. Partial multi-size technique. Arm. Choji's right arm swelled up to a gigantic stature. Fenri gulped, seeing just how angry Choji had become due to one simple word. Choji brought his large fist over Fenri, who became completely overshadowed by the silhouette of Choji's expanded fist, making him even more nervous. With a determined cry, Choji drove his fist down, encompassing a large amount of space, forcing Fenri to leap away lest he be flattened under Choji's righteous fist. The boy looked over to see a fist imprint on the ground, breathed out a huge sigh of relief, knowing he avoided going back to 2 dimensions. Getting back to his feet, he looked to his left and found Choji rolling towards him like a boulder going downhill. Letting out a groan, Fenri proceeded to run around in a serpentine motion, hoping to lose the ball-form Choji, but with each zig or zag, Choji was behind him and gaining. Fenri ran towards a wall with all intent and purpose on climbing it. However, in his rush, He failed to maintain control of his chakra and slipped. It was that slip that let Choji plow into Fenri, grinding him against the wall, making the boy cry out in pain. Choji pushed into the wall with all of his momentum, creating a spherical indent in the previously flat wall. After an entire minute of rotating against the wall, Choji stopped rolling and dropped back to normal size, leaving an unconscious Takigakure shinobi in his wake. Choji looked down at him with that same fiery expression from the beginning of the match and thumped his thumb against his chest. "I am not fat. I am chubby." With one last nod, Choji walked away from the unconscious Taki-teen, leaving the proctor to proclaim him the winner. Combatant booth. Ino, who took enough time from fussing over Sasuke to watch Choji's first fight, was now left with her jaw hanging so wide a bug could easily come zooming in. She was in awe of how ferociously that her chubby teammate had fought. The Yamanaka heiress had thought for sure that Choji would lose, not making her look so bad in case she had lost, but all of that was irrelevant now that Choji won. "Oh no, what if I am the only one on our team to lose in the first round? That would be humiliating," Ino thought while bringing her thumb to her mouth and chewing on it nervously. Oblivious to their teammates' plight were the Nara and Akimichi heirs, who were chatting happily. Or at least Shikamaru was, while Choji was blushing under his best friend's praise. Choji waved his hand as if to fend off the flattering words when he turned to the team's kunoichi with a warm smile. "Good luck out there, Ino." Ino just brushed off Choji's wish and walked down the steps leading to the field of combat. "What's with her?" Choji asked his smart friend, returning to munching on his snacks to restore the chakra he had used during his short battle with Fenri from Takigakure. Cleaning out his ear with his pinky finger and flicking it away with a lazy shrug of his shoulders, Shikamaru answered, "Who knows, women are troublesome, especially the blonde ones." Shikamaru then buried his hands in his pockets, waiting for the next match to begin. His rather blunt statement got an angry click of the teeth from a certain sandy-haired blonde kunoichi from the village hidden in the sand. Narumi said nothing because her focus was on searching for the still absent Naruto. Combat field. Ino stood across from Haku, observing, no, examining her with an intensive gaze that did not bother the ice user at all. You may think that Ino was trying to form some form of strategy after being around Shikamaru, but then you would be wrong. Ino was comparing her looks to those of the ice princess from Kirigakure. She compared everything about them, from Haku's long raven locks to her own blonde hair to the nail polish each was using. Haku simply ignored the look and retained the pleasant smile she normally wore on her face. Ino finally came to a conclusion. "Kami, she is gorgeous. No, I can't be thinking that. I'll beat her." Releasing a faint growl, Ino reached behind her into her ninja tool pouch for a handful of shuriken, which she unleashed on Haku. Haku reacted instantly by disabling the flying black stars with her projectile of choice, Senbon. Gritting her teeth behind her pursed lips, Ino reached for another tool, a kunai, and threw it directly at Haku. Haku, thinking nothing of the attack, threw another Senbon, but that was when she saw the sizzling explosive note tied to the loop on the kunai. The explosion kicked up a layer of dust that a swirling wind turned into a cloud of dust that encompassed the entire field. Ino brought her forearm up to cover her mouth, keeping her from inhaling any dust from her explosive kunai. Ino's eyes darted left and right, searching for Haku, who she had lost when the kunai exploded, starting the whole thing. Ino's eyes went wide when a flash caught her attention, making her stumble back, avoiding a downward slash. Ino saw that there was a blade that looked like ice with a serrated back. The handle of the blade was a dark gray with a light blue stripe running down each side with a snowflake as a pommel. What is that?" Haku was now standing in front of Ino with a frigid gaze on her face, a stark contrast from the welcoming smile. She began the match with her clothing slightly burned from the intensity of the explosion. Haku knew the only reason the female Yamanaka was able to avoid the attack was because of the way that the light reflected off of her blade of ice. Haku was hoping that the cloud of dust would remove that problem, but all the cloud did was hide their battle from the eyes of the stadium. "Zabuza-sama always told me to keep things hidden as long as possible. I need to finish this before the stadium becomes aware of my blade." Snowfall. Sheer cold. Haku held her sword. Snowfall backwards, changing the flow of her chakra, changing the blade form a solid ice to that of a snowy wind confined to one space. Haku raced forward at a speed that overwhelmed the kunoichi from Konoha's Team 10 and brought the snowy sword across her stomach. One cut appeared, followed by a second that was spread from the first in a straight line. In the end, 3 red segments opened up on Ino's stomach that iced over from the low temperature of the sword. Ino fell on her stomach as her body temperature dropped. Haku threw a senbon into her neck, putting her in an unconscious state. That was when the cloud of dust first kicked up from the explosive note cleared, revealing the Ice Princess standing over the unconscious Ino Yamanaka. The results were clear that Haku had defeated her opponent even if none could see how it was done. Winner by knockout, Haku Yuki. In the stands. "Aw man, Ino lost," Sakura said sadly, looking down at Haku, who she had to admit was very pretty. During the time on the bridge, Sakura was not able to see the young Yuki's face, but she had to admit she was pretty now that she had. Despite Ino being her biggest rival in a number of things, Sakura still wished for her success unless it directly affected her. Humans are selfish like that. Now, Sakura, there is no need to hide your happiness behind fake words. The scarecrow of the group chided his pink-haired student still reading his Ika book despite the action that was going on in front of him. Sakura glared at the jounin with gravity-defying hair for his words that were sadly true, not that she would ever admit it. Kakashi looked up sensing said glare, and I smiled, only serving to infuriate the daughter of the councilwoman further. Kakashi then watched on with a morbid expression as a kunai pierced his little orange book and pinned it against a pillar a few rows back. Kakashi glanced over fearfully at the Uzumaki woman, who had done it, to find her hair swaying like it was on fire. Kakashi whimpered piteously as Kushina cracked her knuckles menacingly before dragging the fearful Hitaki away for a behavior correction. This action got laughs from the jounin gathered as well as their genin. Unbeknownst to all of them, the special tutor, Ebisu, snuck over to the book and took it before slinking away to indulge his perverted nature. Combat field. Genma bit down on his senbon as he glanced at the boy wearing dress clothing and the busty kunoichi from Kumogakure. Genma then took a second glance at Kakujio, or more specifically at what the boy chose to wear for the fight he was about to get into. However, Genma shrugged it off since his friend Guy and his young protege wore something much more revolting. Kakujio versus Samwei. Begin. Kakujio leaned back, limbering himself up, taking satisfaction when he heard something in his spine crack in a good way. Turning his eyes back to Samwei, he gave an excited grin as his eyes lit up with anticipation. I really hope you can give me a good fight, Samwei-san. Kakujio cracked his knuckles and straightened his yellow tie out before dropping into a loose combat stance. To most in the stands it looked riddled with holes, but that was what Kakujio wanted, since he would be able to counter and counter viciously when his opponent would strike for the false openings he was creating purposefully. Samwei stood there keeping her cool as she tried to dissect her opponent from Kirigakure's combat stance. It was easy to find flaws in them, too easy if she had to guess. Her guess would be that it was a lure of sorts. Taking a calming breath, Samwei decided to keep to her strengths instead of charging into a possible ambush without any previous knowledge. His demeanor spoke of the utmost confidence in his strength. The kunoichi from the land of lightning could tell that much. The problem was guessing if that confidence had a base or if it was groundless confidence. Likewise, Kakujio let out a deep chuckle, nodding in complete agreement before rushing towards an immobile Samwei. Reaching the kunoichi, Kakujio threw a straight jab at Samwei's throat. Samwei swayed to the left before attacking with her own short whip-like kick to Kakujio's waist, forcing his to fall back a few steps. Not ready to throw in the towel yet, Kakujio raced forward and fired off another flurry of rapid fist strikes, forcing Samwei to bring up her guard, not able to evade all of the attacks. Samwei ducked under one of Kakujio's overextended fist and retaliated with a quick hook to Kakujio's cheek, making his head turn with the direction of the blow. The agile blow did nothing to knock the battle-happy grin off of Kakujio's face. In fact, it only served to widen the grin. Kakujio's gripped Samwei's fist and flipped the kunoichi over his shoulder, but Samwei was flexible enough to land on her feet. However, Kakujio's kept his grip, wrenching Samwei's arm into an uncomfortable position before sending a jostling kick into her lower spine. Samwei rolled across the ground, unable to brace herself due to the Kiri teen's grip on her hand that wasn't released till it was too late. Kakujio giggled to himself as the thrill of battle started to pump more and more blood through his body. Samwei unleashed the tanto that was latched onto the swell of her back, hoping to use her prowess with her tanto to create an advantage. Samwei waited as Kakujio's closed in yet again with a fist, ready to deal more damage to the kunoichi. However, Samwei, had her tanto readied this time. Kakujio smirked as his fist neared Samwei's pretty face. However, Samwei slashed out with her tanto, halting the progress of the incoming haymaker. Everyone watched as the small blade lodged itself in between one of the well-dressed teen's knuckles, but to the shock of almost all present, the blade didn't cut his skin. What? The blade didn't even cut the first layer of his skin. The only time this has happened was when B-sensei used the Hachibi's iron hide, which is to be expected, but this guy's skin can stop my blade. The usually cool Samwei was momentarily shaken from what her eyes were relaying to her brain. Combatant booth. Omoy blinked before peering down at Samwei's blade, which was being pushed against Kakujio's hand, as was shown by the skin pushing with the tanto, but there was no laceration of any size. What's going on? Samwei has always taken care of her equipment. There is no way she let blade become dull. No way. Omoy asked his red-haired partner, rolling his lollipop between his teeth in a contemplative gesture. Yujito and Nibi were unsure of what they were witnessing, but Yujito was sure that it wasn't because Samwei was carrying faulty equipment. Samwei would rather be caught doing something embarrassing than allowing her equipment to fall into a state of disarray. That guy has some sort of trick to him. Sasuke too was displaying his disbelief by tightening his grip around the rail to the point that his knuckles went white from the strength behind the grip. The Uchiha Sharingan glaring brightly at the Kiri-teen in hopes of unraveling the mystery being presented, but ultimately finding nothing but a growing sense of frustration for his efforts. Just what is he? Shikamaru, who was standing next to the fuming Uchiha, just sighed, as was the norm, with a slight shake of his head, with an annoyed sigh coming from his mouth. It seems even more troublesome people are appearing. I really don't want to fight that kind of guy. The Nara, who had no problem engaging in sloth-like behavior, let his thoughts be known. Naomi glanced down at the still grinning Kakujio with a rather serious look on her normally easy-going face. It just goes to show you that there are all kinds of shinobi in this world, Naomi said rather wisely as she watched Samwei try to comprehend what she was facing. Her words got a nod of agreement from her sister. The other two shinobi hailing from the village hidden in the mist opted for silence, not wanting to spoil their teammates' theatrics. Something they sadly had come to expect from the well-dressed shinobi. Combat field. Samwei tried to put more force behind her tanto in hopes that the added pressure would break through her opponent's strong defense. Kakujio shook his head at the futility of the kunoichi's effort to cut him up. Only seen to the eyes of the Kage watching and those on the field, a sudden burst of light yellow energy knocked the Kumogakure kunoichi's tanto into the air. Acting upon the shock of what happened, Kakujio lashed out with a quick kick that Samwei managed to avoid by instantly leaping back when she was disarmed. Samwei furrowed her brow, never seeing anything like she had just witnessed. Samwei readied a kunai with an explosive tag wrapped around the hilt, knowing that without more information her chances of winning were slim at best. Frowning with concentration, Samwei tossed the kunai the Kiri shinobi, who no doubt saw the attack coming but did nothing to erase the grin he had sported since the initial moments of the match. Kakujio leaped back when his back came in contact with a tree that he had failed to notice, his eyes reflecting a brief startle when the kunai reached him and rung the arena with a resounding bang. Samwei waited for the area of impact to clear with a calm demeanor, but on the inside she was waiting anxiously to see if the last attack bared any results. The smoke cleared and chuckles came from the area where the well-dressed shinobi from Kirigakure was seen. When the smoke from the fire cleared, Kakujio was seen with his arms crossed over his chest with one eye opened, looking around wildly. Samwei looked to see that the tree around him was unscathed, showing that he did indeed take the blast from the explosive note. To her silent ire, Kakujio's flimsy black dress shirt was not even ripped or singed, so the question was how? Samwei didn't have the answer. Kakujio blew on his hands childishly in an effort to rile up the poised kunoichi. Man, oh man, that one stung something fierce. That is some high-quality equipment you have there, lady, Kakujio said with a sing-song voice as he dropped himself back into a loose combat stance. Samwei's eyes narrowed at the shinobi for his nonchalance, but he seemed rather passive as well. Samwei could use that because without being pushed she was allotted more time to try and solve the riddle across from her. Samwei finally realized that it was not confidence that had the teen from her so loose but arrogance. Arrogance and passiveness meant that the boy would be very susceptible to defeat. If I can't deal physical damage in that way, then why not try alternative means? Samwei closed one of her eyes and held her fingers in a circular motion. Bringing her one eye to the self-made scope, she positioned her hand, which was pointed like the barrel of a gun, so that the grinning Kakujio was directly in her crosshairs. The two fingers she had pointed started to glow from the tips, alerting Kakujio as to impending danger. Lightning release. Flash transfer. There was a bright flash that blurred Kakujio's vision. However, hearing the sound of crackling, he rolled to the left, and not a moment too soon as the bolt of lightning ripped through the tree before striking the stadium wall. Kakujio let out a sigh of relief at being able to avoid being coursed by a large amount of volts. Not a pleasant feeling, he was sure. Kakujio looked up and groaned when he saw Samwei aiming at once again. Scrambling to his feet as Samwei fired another shot, Kakujio ran off in a circular motion, making it difficult for Samwei to keep an accurate shot on his springing figure. Samwei tried to aim ahead of Kakujio, but he would make a slight hesitation in his step to throw off her aim, making her frown with annoyance. To Samwei's eye, Kakujio seemed to slow down after a while of running, urging her to take her shot, which she did. Kakujio, seeing how the beam of lightning was coming straight for him, whirled around to face the oncoming rush of voltage bravely. Just when it seemed that the jutsu would score a hit, Kakujio put his hand out and the lightning died without so much as a scratch. The crowd was baffled at what they saw, but Samwei's eyes shimmered with recognition, finally being able to see what was happening to all of the attacks she was performing. Kakujio grinned while shaking the hand that was glowing with a yellow film of energy. Well, now that the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, why don't I show off my arsenal? Any? Kiryokuan. Tommy Gun Blaster. Everyone minus those from Kiri watched on in shock as a cyclone of yellow energy began to morph in front of the grinning shinobi until it took a final shape. The stock shifted outwards before connecting to the main gun of the body, followed by the creation of the barrel of the gun that stretched out a bit. There was a handle connected to the main body of the gun just behind the trigger, and in front of the trigger was a round drum followed by another handle connected to the barrel. The Tommy gun was finished off with a brilliant yellow glow that made the crowd all admire the weapon created. Samwei, with the rest of the crowd, shinobi included, were all clueless as to what a Tommy gun was, but they correctly assumed that was what he had, pointing at the blonde kunoichi. The trigger on the gun was pulled, and suddenly the gun fired bullets of the same brilliant yellow hue at the shocked Samwei. Shaking out of her daze, the cloud kunoichi proceeded to evade the bullets. However, the foreign attack scored a few hits that clipped her shoulder and shins, leaving burnt skin, making the girl cry out in pain. With one eye open, Samwei watched the drum get pulled from the gun and a new drum materialize out of thin air. Biting down the pain, Samwei channeled chakra into the muscles in her legs and shot off at Kakujio, who was trying to reload the gun, a glaring weakness in the jutsu. Samwei reached him before he could finish and slammed an open palm against his chest, making him lose control of the gun. Lightning release. Depth charge. Samwei then funneled a bolt of electricity with enough power to blow a ship sailing in water, hence the name. Samwei let a small smile form on her face when she saw Kakujio's head slump, making his shadow his eyes, making the kunoichi believe it was her win. Kakujio started to laugh again, making Samwei frown at him, until she followed his gaze down to see her hand was planted firmly against an armor consisting of the same energy from earlier. Kiryokuan, Kevlar armor. It is really a handy little thing, ain't it? I mean, it just saved me from feeling my nervous system getting jump-started by your lightning show. Before Samwei could respond, Kakujio hit Samwei with a rather crude head, but sending the Kumo-nin stumbling back in a slight daze. Samwei tried to shake the cobwebs as Kakujio watched on with a grin, hoping to showcase more of his rather special talents for the world to see and know his name. Kagebuth. Kiryokuan. The aged Tsuchikage said aloud, tasting the word as his brow furrowed as he tried to recall from his many decades of service to find anything like he was seeing from the Kiri shinobi, but to his frustration he couldn't recall anything like it. The Mizukage, sensing her elder counterpart's confusion, decided to inject some clarity into the situation at hand. Kiryokuan, or the energy release, is something special limited only to Kakujio. He has the ability to create many things with his strong body energy. It is similar to that of the Uzumaki, aside from the fact his chakra does not have the sealing or binding abilities that the Uzumakis have been known for. Mei informed her fellow Kage with a demure smile and a proud gleam in her barely opened eyes. The Kazekage glanced over to Kage from the village, hidden in the mist, with an intrigued look in his usually blank eyes. "Do you know who the boy's parents are?" The Wind Shadow asked in hopes of obtaining a few members of the family that the boy came from, then stabilize a clan in of energy release users in Suna, thus elevating his position in the shinobi world. At that, the Mizuki's smile dropped into a somber frown as she looked down at the field while shaking her head. Sadly, we do not. My subordinates found Kakujio near the end of the war with no family, and there are no records on his lineage either. We tried to have his memories searched, but the boy has repressed it all to the extent that he has forgotten they existed in the first place. Minato's blue eyes focused in on the armor that the Kirigakure shinobi was currently wearing with interest. He, like most, had never seen anything like what Kakujio was creating, and he was naturally curious. The Kevlar armor looked like a flak jacket, but much more advanced than what they had. Where does he get the information on the things he creates? They are quite incredible. He said that the designs come to him in his dreams. I do not press on that matter. Mei answered in a slightly cooler tone when speaking to the Hokage, still upset with their refusal to aid them in their battle against Yagura, causing thousands upon thousands of unnecessary deaths to befall Mizu no Kuni. The Raikage was gripping his chair so tightly it started to give way to his monstrous physical strength. Come on, Samwei, combat field. Samwei was grasping at straws now because it seemed that none of her ninjutsu or taijutsu attacks could crack that energy release of Kakujio's. She thought about using her Rantun, storm release, to try and crack that pesky armor technique, but then she wouldn't have the ace for the next round for Haku. And then to add to the problem, the few bullet wounds she had inflicted upon her were burning something rather fierce. The Cloud Genin knew that she needed to finish this and finish it right now. Samwei took a deep breath before opening her eyes, shining with determination to make her home proud, ignoring the laughing Kiri shinobi. Kakujio watched with an arched eyebrow as Samwei ran around his back, but he remained motionless as she circled behind him. Kakujio rolled his eyes, seeing Samwei go for another lightning blast like it would work or something. Kakujio waited for the lightning blast to get closer and closer before a screen on yellow energy shot up from the ground, negating the attack without problem. Kakujio chuckled at the desperate attacks that were sent against his shield. All ended up doing nothing to the shield he had created. Kiryokuan, photon screen. You should know by now that attacks of that level can't break my defenses. I think I should finish this now since I am getting kinda bored here. Kakujio gave out a dry chuckle when he felt Samwei glaring at his back, but shrugged it off without a care. Kakujio's eyes widened in shock, and then he suddenly coughed up some blood and fell to his knees in excruciating pain. He looked down to find Samwei's tanto with electricity coursing through the blade that was lodged in his stomach. He could feel his muscles contracting as he laid there on his back looking up at a bruised and cut Samwei who was looking down at him. How? You were too confident in your abilities, and when you were laughing you were distracted. I placed a minor genjutsu on you to make you perceive things in an inverted manner. So when you thought I was attacking from behind, I was attacking you in a frontal fashion. It is overconfidence like yours leads to the death of shinobi much stronger than we are. Checkmate. Samwei walked away, rolling the shoulder that was shot with a silent groan. Kakujio laid there staring up at the bright blue sky with a disappointed expression. He knew he was showboating, but that was so people would recognize his name and request him personally. Kakujio managed to shake his head in disappointment at his failure to get out of the first round and the chewing out he would get from his sensei. Man, sensei is going to put me through the ringer when I get back to Kiri. That slave driver. And no doubt it will be worst because of why I had lost. Man, this is going to suck. Winner by technical knockout, Samwei. Daimyo Booth. Oh my. That was a rather intense battle those two young ones had. The Fire Daimyo said in a childish voice, his face hidden by the small fan he was waving over his face. This served to keep people from reading his emotions like a mask, but without covering the entirety of his face. I need to talk to the Mizukage about teaching the shinobi about arrogance, grumbled the disgruntled water daimyo as he handed a grinning lightning daimyo a slip with the amount of money placed on who would win the last fight. And, let's just put it around $1 billion for context. The guards just looked on with disbelief, seeing how frivolous their feudal lords were being with such large amounts of money. Humph, it is not like any of this matters because Gaara will be winning this tournament and then I will have bragging rights. The large daimyo from Kaze no Kuni stated rather boldly with his eyes closed, clearly not expecting to be challenged. His eyes opened when there was a loud snort off to the side. You mean the boy who can't control his impulse to kill people? Even after a proctor has told him to stop? Yes, he sounds like an excellent choice. The daimyo from the land of earth asserted himself by voicing his skepticism in the wind daimyo's choice. The fire daimyo giggled behind his fan at the antics of his fellow daimyo, and then there were still more fights to be had. Combat field. Chajurro pushed his glasses up his face and lowered himself with Hiramakerii lowered down in perfect balance with his center of gravity. Omoy spat out the stick that once held a candy at the end while gripping his own blade while staring down the hidden Miss Swordsman with a serious gaze leveled on the boy. Both swordsmen were anxious to see what a style from another village could do when put up against their own. Chajurro was the first to speak with a small smile that displayed his pointed teeth. I look forward to seeing your capabilities as a swordsman, Omoy-san. I can say the same. Omoy replied casually before he and Chajurro rushed forward at the same time, getting the crowd to rave seeing two similar styles clashing. Chajurro swung his larger blade, forcing Omoy to falter and avoid the strike. Omoy quickly went on to create a plan of attack, seeing that not only did Chajurro's blade a longer reach but greater defense capabilities. Man, those Kiri blades sure make having duels difficult. Omoy thought with a slight drawl as he leaped to his right, avoiding a downward slash from the blue-haired teen. Chajurro tried to pull the tip of his blade from the ground but found it to be stuck in the ground. Omoy, seeing a moment of opportunity, slashed at Chajurro's arm, cutting the boy's skin and getting a yelp of pain. Using more strength, Chajurro whipped Hiramakerii from the ground, swinging it at Omoy, who brought his blade up vertically to impede the larger sword from bifurcated. Omoy grit his teeth as the force behind the swing wore on his arms and sent him skidding back from Chajurro. Even if he is able to wield it like it weighs nothing, it still takes time for him to wind up his weapon. That is my window of opportunity. Omoy grunted and ran at the Kiri swordsman, but before he got within range, he darted to his left. Chajurro tried to turn so that Omoy was within his vision again, but Omoy darted off in the opposite direction once more. Chajurro couldn't catch Omoy, and Omoy was managing to close the distance, making it more difficult for Chajurro to use his larger weapon. Omoy lunged in, however Chajurro flipped his blade, parrying the stab with the width of his sword. Chajurro pushed Omoy back and lashed out, slicing Omoy across the stomach, or so he thought. Omoy dropped into a cleaved log in front of Chajurro. Substitution. Chajurro then sensed something behind him, but it was too late for him to put up a defensive measure against what was coming. Omoy got behind Chajurro using the substitution as a distraction. He got the point of his blade into Chajurro's shoulder, but that was it before he found himself being painfully rolled across the floor. Omoy pulled himself from the ground and tried to take a step forward, only to find a jostling pain jolt through his body. Omoy, now with a tweaked ankle, looked towards Chajurro, who shot forward unexpectedly, making Omoy try to take a step back, only to stumble as he tried to put force on his bad ankle. Chajurro sliced down on Omoy with Hiramakerii glowing a faint blue. Omoy, with his only choice being rolling out of harm's way, was able to avoid the attacking, leaving Chajurro to create a divot in the ground where Omoy was downed. Standing up, Omoy took a few steps back, ignoring his body as it hissed in protest. He bit down on his lip, trying to figure out what he could do now. He was wounded and Chajurro only had a few small cuts. I need him to come in closer, then I can unleash one of my moves where he won't be able to block it. Feign weakness. Omoy turned and tried to limp into the trees with a more pronounced limp than he really had. Chajurro, seeing this, gave chase, not wanting a wounded opponent to have a chance for recovery. Omoy's ears picked up the sound of Chajurro's footsteps that were getting progressively louder with each fleeting second. Omoy tightened his grip on his handle and suddenly whirled around, getting Chajurro to fall back a step in surprise. Cloud style. Silent sundown. Omoy rushed forward faster than Chajurro could anticipate, ignoring the pain in his ankle. He cut clear through Chajurro's ribs, leaving a nasty but not fatal wound. The attack was so quick that the blade didn't make a sound even as it cut through the air. The attack also proved too quick to allow Chajurro time to lift the heavy Hiramakerii in time to fend off the slash. Omoy, who was facing the opposite direction of a wide-eyed Chajurro, let out a sigh of relief, knowing that the match had come to an end and he could get treatment. His post-match plans were cancelled when he heard a splash behind him that made him turn to find a puddle of water. That was a Mizu Bunshin? But when did he have time to do that? Omoy wondered aloud as he looked for Chajurro, who was nowhere to be seen, but Omoy wouldn't release his guard. Chajurro then appeared in front of Omoy with the use of a Mizu Shunshin, getting Omoy to focus in on him. I had time to make a water clone when I sent you tumbling away during the earlier sword exchange in the match, while I tucked myself away to learn your style. Good thing to since that cut would have put me in the hospital for quite a while. I was hoping that the clone would make him lax his guard, but it only heightened it. Chajurro let out a mental sigh since it was going so well thus far, but he also couldn't finish Omoy since he was quicker than him. Power could not do a thing if you can't score a hit. Combatant Booth. Whoa, that Chajurro guy must be strong to be able to swing that huge blade the way that he does. Fu said while looking down Chajurro as he tried to contemplate how he could catch the faster shinobi from Kumogakure. Fu's mood had taken a drastic change for the better since one of her tormentors, or who others called teammates, was gone. Haku, who was standing near the mint-haired Jinchuriki from the village, hidden by a waterfall, nodded in agreement with her words. Chojuro is such a timid man in daily life, but when he gets on to the battlefield that all changes. It always amazes me. Haku had no issue with serving some compliments for her teammate who no doubt earned them. Come on Omoy, get your ass in gear. Karui shouted with her hands cupping her mouth to amplify her shout. Standing behind her, Samwei and Yujito shared a concerned glance with each other, seeing the same thing. Yujito crossed her arms and shook her head softly as she looked down at the field. He really needs to do something because he is favoring his ankle more and more as the match goes on. If it keeps up like this, Chajuro-san will no doubt overtake him. Yujito said aloud, getting a small nod from the bandaged Samwei and an angry frown from Karui. Shikamaru, who early had been looking very uninterested, was now watching the match with a high amount of scrutiny because whoever will the match would be his opponent in the next round, assuming he beat Tamari. They both use swords, but their styles seem entirely different. But both require them to be within close range to their opponent. Shikamaru analyzed the battle as it started up once again. Combat field. Chajurro advanced on Omoy with Hiramakarei elevated above his head, and with a silent determination he swung it down on a hampered Omoy. Omoy, not able to get away in time, was forced to brace himself and take the blow by guarding with his katana. Omoy grunted and his back was slammed into a tree and his katana flung into the air some feet away. Omoy was panting heavily as he looked at his katana buried in the earth over in the distance. Omoy rolled under a slash from Chajurro that cut down the tree and wrapped his hand around his katana and got back to his feet with a great amount of effort. Omoy, with as much as he could, rushed forward with his blade pointed directly at Chajurro, cried out his next attack. Cloud style. Swift skies. Chajurro, seeing the path of the straight lunged, positioned his massive weapon to deflect the smaller one's attack, but then to his shock Omoy leaped into the air, and his katana fell down on Chajurro's shoulder. Chajurro cried out painfully as he felt the harsh steel impact his shoulder, making the bone crack slightly. Chajurro bit down on his tongue and flailed his blade towards Omoy, wildly forcing the Cloud Teen to retreat again. Omoy grunted in pain when he landed, but before he could move, his injured ankle gave way and he fell to a kneeling position. Chajurro grunted when the stabbing pain spread down his arm as he thrusted Hiramakarei into the ground and went through a series of hand signs. Omoy, sensing the attack was coming, tried to stand but failed as the pain was just too much to stand any longer. Water release. Stormy blockade. A violent blast of water came from Chajurro's open mouth and collided down on top of the Cloud Shinobi. Omoy couldn't keep his footing and was swallowed up the technique and washed down the field straight into one of the walls. The crowd in the front row leaned over the rail to try and see what was going to happen next. Omoy opened his eyes after being deposited rather harshly against the wall that rattled his entire skeletal structure. It seemed to see that Chajurro was already standing over him. Directing an open palm in front of Omoy, a spherical orb of water sprung from his palm and trapped the Kumogakure genin within. Water release, water prison. It would be best for you to give up now, Omoy-san, or else you might drown inside of my prison. Chajurro advised his opponent with a friendly smile, ignoring the sweat that was dripping down his brow from the physical fight between he and Omoy. Omoy gasped in shock when he saw the orb of chakra-infused water closed in around him, letting water slide down his throat. Choking slightly, the water bubbled as he coughed up the water. Finally getting a breath he could hold, he looked around to see if he could escape. The obvious point to attack would be where Chajurro's hand was connected to the prison, but to Omoy's ire he found moving to be impossible. Omoy silently cursed his predicament before locking eyes with Chajurro, whose words had reached Omoy's ears. Seeing no other option, Omoy begrudgingly nodded his head, conceding defeat. Chajurro let the prison go, dropping Omoy to his knees, allowing him to get the oxygen he was deprived of while inside of the jutsu. Sheathing Hiramakarei, Chajurro walked over to Omoy and offered to help him up, which Omoy gladly accepted. The crowd all applauded the show of good sportsmanship as the proctor declared Chajurro the winner. In the stands, "That was pretty awesome. Say, how come we don't have shinobi who use swords like those two did?" Kiba asked, still feeling the high of watching such an intense clash between the two swordsmen that had captivated the audience and most of the genins. Akamaru barked, supporting what his human partner was asking/saying. Hinata tapped the Inuzuka heir on the shoulder, garnering his attention, which got her to look down at her fingers. "Ah, Kiba-kun, you are forgetting about Naruto-san." Hinata reminded her teammate, getting a defiant scoff from the feral-looking teen. Kiba always toted being the alpha male, yet Naruto acted the part, whereas the Inuzuka spoke the part. Well, Kiba, both Kiri and Kumo focus highly on their kenjutsu, while Konoha focuses in on formation-based units, and that is why there aren't as many swordsmen in Konoha, also because of bloodlines. Something Kumo never had many of and Kiri is lacking due to their war. Kakashi informed the young Inuzuka pup, now focusing in on the matches after his chat with Kushina. "Shikamaru is up next. Do you think he can win, sensei?" A bandaged but yet still spry Yamanaka heiress asked of her sensei with blue eyes reflecting genuine curiosity. Asuma could tell that his student was still sore from her early round loss, but he was proud that she wouldn't let that turn her into some sort of cynic. Asuma let out a plume of smoke from his mouth and rubbed his bearded chin with a contemplative glance directed at the sky. "Well, that's hard to say, Ino. We both know how Shikamaru can be even lazier than a sloth at times. I just hope the magnitude of these exams will remedy that, at least partially." Asuma closed his eyes and shook his head. "Or at least I hope it does." Combat field. Shikamaru bit down a displeased groan when he recognized the look the fan-wielding kunoichi was giving him. A look of feminine fury. Shikamaru cursed Choji for convincing him to try until he had secured his promotion to the rank of Chunin. He glanced up at the clouds, which only made Tamari's anger grow, believing that the Nara heir was not taking her seriously. "Man, this is such a troublesome tournament. I really wish my mother would let me just live an ordinary life with an ordinary girl, but no, I need to be a shinobi." Shikamaru released a tired sigh that finally made Tamari snap at what she perceived to be a disrespectful gesture. Snapping open her fan and waving it at the reluctant, pineapple-haired shinobi from Konoha, she grinned, watching the sharp blast of air traveling at Shikamaru, who didn't seem like he planned to move. Tamari's easy win was snatched away when the shadow-manipulating shinobi suddenly moved to his left, avoiding the wind attack created by the giant war fan. Tamari started to backpedal as she watched a shadow stretch from her opponent and slither on over towards her. She quickly kept her retreat along with random movements to her left and right, but Shikamaru wasn't a Nara for nothing. He had seen that obvious tactic coming and split his shadow to snare the kunoichi. Tamari's eyes widened and she cursed herself for being hurted SP easily, and just when it looked as if she was about to be caught, the shadow stopped like the strain on the stretch had reached its limit. Tamari held her breath, waiting for the two shadows to pincer in on her, but when nothing came, she allowed herself to look back at Shikamaru, who had a strained grin on his face as a bead of a sweat made its way down his temple. "I was so close to getting her, but it seems she is out of my reach, if only slightly." Troublesome. Tamari calmed down and leaped back just for comfort before she began to try and calculate the distance Shikamaru's shadow could reach. Shikamaru, noticing what she was doing, took a kunai dressed with an explosive tag and threw it at Tamari, hoping to break her train of thought. Tamari, storing the information away, swung her fan upward, creating a rising wind that knocked the kunai high into the atmosphere where the tag went off. "He wanted to keep me from learning his reach, and then when the tag went off, he would use my lessened field of vision to get me with his shadow. Despite his lack of drive, he is dangerous." Tamari thought with a growing respect for the resident Nara genius of her generation. Tamari took the offensive, opening her fan some more to show off a second purple sphere in the middle, which had Shikamaru arch an eyebrow in curiosity. Tamari, with a small shout, threw another wider and faster blast of wind at Shikamaru, who didn't have enough time to move, so he had to brace himself behind a cross guard. The Nara heir moaned out in pain when his body was slammed into the unforgiving ground. Shikamaru looked up at the clouds with a strange expression as he forced himself to stand back up and continue his fight with the Kazakage's daughter. Shikamaru turned to face Tamari, only this time her giant war fan was opened up all the way, and she was holding it behind her back with an arm. Tamari revolved on her heel, throwing another blast of air at Shikamaru. Wind release. Wind Scythe Jutsu. Shikamaru, who heard the name at the last moment, leaned back to his left, but the wind still cut his cheek, letting blood flow free from the laceration. Shikamaru dabbed his palm on his cheek, wiping the blood of his cheek off and rubbing dirt into the wound and clogging the cut up. Tamari gave Shikamaru a wide grin, seeing the blood she had drawn. Shikamaru knew that he would need to avoid the rest of her attacks, or he would find himself in pieces deposited around the arena. Shikamaru took off running to avoid another wind jutsu from the fan-wielding kunoichi. Tamari growled after a few minutes of cat and mouse with the teen from Konoha. She was getting irritated. The ground was carved all around from the number of shots that she fired off, each with no success. "Why won't you stay still? Stop running, it is annoying." Tamari demanded, firing off another scythe wind at Shikamaru, who, shocker, ran away from the attack. Shikamaru kneeled down and sent his shadow at Tamari, who chuckled at the desperate and rather obvious attack. Shaking her head, the sandy blonde from Tsunade jumped back, and as she expected, the shadow stopped a few yards in front of her. Looking up at Shikamaru, she shook her head at the smirking air. "For someone who is said to be a genius, you're quite dumb. Maybe genius is thrown around in the hidden leaf. Usually when someone figures out an attack pattern, you change it." Shikamaru shook his head at the confident kunoichi, which got him a frown in return. Tamari went for a final swing of her fan, but to her immense shock, she couldn't move a muscle on her body. Shikamaru glanced down, allowing Tamari to do so as well, and see that their shadows were linked to each other. "I wasn't just running. I was stalling for time. I knew you would figure out my reach. I planned for that. I wanted that. Once you figured it out, you would get confident and sloppy. The sun and clouds move, and that means the shadows move as well. The closer that we get to sundown, the longer my reach." Tamari was left speechless as Shikamaru told her his plan, and that was then that she realized that the teen in front of her was already 3 moves ahead, and probably had a backup plan as well. Shikamaru reached into his kunai pouch and held it in his hand. However, Tamari didn't have a pouch on that side, so she was holding nothing. "I suggest you forfeit, otherwise you will lose your life. I'll throw this kunai at you, and I won't even release your shadow to give you a chance to dodge it." Tamari gave the Nara heir her best glare for a few moments before sighing and nodding her head in acceptance. "I give up," she conceded regretfully. "Winner by surrender, Shikamaru Nara." Combatant booth. Narumi looked around anxiously as the next 2 fighters made their way down for the second to last match of the first round. There was still no sign of Naruto, and his match was next. Narumi couldn't lie to herself. She was nervous something happened to her brother. Her head snapped to the side when she felt a hand on her shoulder, but eased up, seeing it was her sister. "Take it easy, Narumi-chan. Nisan will be here, and then he will kick the arrogant Uchiha around the arena." Naomi assured her sister, since she had faith that her brother wouldn't miss the chance to place Sasuke in his place in front of the eyes of the world. Who would miss that chance? Narumi looked at her sister for a few minutes before relaxing and giving her sister a small smile as she nodded her head. "Yeah, you are right, he'll be here." Naomi nodded her head with a bright grin, and the 2 siblings walked up to the railing to watch the upcoming match. Combat field. "You may as well give up now, Taki Shinobi, because you can't beat me. Look at it as saving yourself from worldwide humiliation." The kunoichi from Kirigakure, Terra, offered her blue scarf-wearing opponent. Shirku scoffed at the audacity of her offer and at the fact that she actually thought she could defeat him. Terra glared at Shirku, obviously not pleased by the amused smirk that was currently on his face. She was offering him a chance to go through a painless defeat, and he was amused. "Do you find something I said funny, trash?" Terra asked rhetorically, her face contorted into a scowl. Shirku looked at Terra and nodded his head, showing that he did find something funny. Actually, he found the whole thing to be quite the joke. "Yes, as a matter of fact, I do find something funny. I find it funny that you believe you can defeat me. The idea is simply laughable," Shirku shouted while running through a series of hand signs, leaving Terra to fume at his words. Water release. Water dragon's pressure cannon. A dragon created from water came up behind the scroll that Shirku dropped behind his back. The dragon's body curled around Shirku protectively as it glared menacingly at Terra, who took an instinctive step back at its appearance. The dragon's mouth opened, and a small beam of water was fired from its mouth directly at the ground and rising as the dragon's head moved up. Terra, watching the path of the attack, leaped up to avoid the path of the beam. Yet the dragon's head was faster as the beam widened and clipped her ankle, sending her staggering. The dragon's body had become noticeably shorter, telling that it was using its own body to fire the cannon. With his opponent midair and vulnerable, the dragon burst forth and clenched down on Terra, driving her into the ground with its jaw. Shirku shook his head and started to walk away. Couldn't even take one jutsu. Shirku started to walk away with a disappointed look on his face, missing the slight twitch of Terra's hand. Getting up and glaring at the Taki shinobi, Terra went through a series of hand signs, but was slowed down by the damage done to her from Shirku's last move. Ignoring the blood dripping down her head, Terra grinned as she finished her jutsu. Water release. Scalding intentions. Shirku spun around when he heard his foe's voice and went wide-eyed when a giant wave came crashing down on top of him. The steam from the water wisped up into the air, making those in the front row sweat from the heat. Terra grimaced as she heard her opponent's muffled shouts of pain as the searing water washed over his body. Terra rubbed the back of her hand across the bloodied section of her forehead with a groan as her tired muscles cried out in agony. That's it. Terra looked on in disbelief as Shirku walked through the steam, but she gagged at what she saw. The skin around Shirku's jaw was burnt clean to the point where she could see his teeth and jaw. He looked like a horror movie zombie. Shirku growled at Terra, which made his exposed jaw move in a very unnerving way. Terra was so enthralled by the sight of his jaw, not in a good way, that she missed the last sign in the series of his jutsu. Water release. Waterfall splitting sword. A glob of water coated the young man from Taki's arm and slowly took the shape of a sword while water ran through it like a current. Shirku sped forward and overtook Terra, and with one quick slash removed the girl's arm, but the look in his eyes craved more. Shirku grinned darkly and moved his sword arm to the unconscious Kunoichi's neck to finish the job. The Sunaproctor took that moment and intervened by gripping Shirku's arm and throwing him back, saving the girl's life. Shirku ignored the proctor, who went to stop the Kirigakure Kunoichi from bleeding out as he grabbed his blue scarf and glanced down at it for a moment before wrapping it around his jaw, hiding the deformity from the sight of the world. After that little incident between the shinobi from Takigakure and the Kunoichi from Kirigakure, Genma stood there with Sasuke as he called Naruto's name for a third time for him to come down to the field. Sasuke stood there with a cocky smirk, believing the reason the scorned child of Konoha's first family was not present was due to his fear of him. Genma looked up to the Kage's booth to see that his Kage gnawed down to him. Genma cleared his throat. Last call for Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki. Please come to the field or you will be disqualified. Then, as if a switch was flipped, the audience recognized the name of the shinobi who was being called and went into a hideous uproar. That's the demon brat. What's he doing here? Why is Hokage-sama letting that thing compete? We should kill him before it's too late. What if it has gotten too strong for us to kill? No worries, Uchiha-sama will finally rid us of that monstrosity. Death to the demon. That was the chant that had prevailed across the stadium from the bigoted villagers and those who weren't sure but didn't want the others to turn on them. Their hate-infused movement had blinded them for serious killer intent flooding the place. Minato and I were radiating killing intent, being the two Kages who were the most protective over their Jinchuriki, while Inoki and the Kazekage looked indifferent, while Mei was frowning sadly as the blind hate seemed to spread like a disease from person to person. The hidden leaf Jounin present were leaking killing intent that kept those around them silent, especially Kushina, who was being restrained by Asuma and Kakashi, or else she would be up there killing a few foolish people. The genin from Konoha were looking around with small frowns, not understanding what was going on with the elder villagers. Jiraiya, who was not around the village during Naruto's childhood, was clearly disgusted as the chant seemed to get louder. Tsunade, who was in the medic ward, was glaring at the wall as the noise came into the ward because even if she thought Naruto was a brat, he didn't deserve a whole village clamoring for his head. Yujito and Fu were all glaring dangerously at the civilians since they knew exactly what the people were talking about, having experienced it at one point in their lives as well. They weren't really shocked to see that the Jinchuriki's curse of hatred had come to Konoha as well. Even Gaara and his mother wanted the blood of the villagers because they reminded Gaara of his own childhood when people often tried to assassinate him. Shikamaru, Choji and Lee were doing their best restraining a livid Narumi and Naomi from going into the crowd and defending their brother's honor. The rage coming off of the two sisters was palpable and made the others who weren't busy contemplating killing leaf villagers nervous and on edge. That's enough. Minato's furious voice erupted over the stadium, stopping any and all noise dead in its tracks as all eyes flittered over to Minato, who was standing in front of the Kage's booth. I will not allow you to insult my son while I am standing right here. How dare you insult the young man who has kept you safe since the day he was born? He was given the Kyuubi's conscience by my choice, but it seemed that my villagers couldn't see that it was my son right in front of them. Well, not anymore. From henceforth and I mean anyone within the village hidden in the leaves that refers to Naruto's status as the demon or Kyuubi or anything similar will be dealt a swift death. Minato's edict got a number of smiles from the shinobi all along the arena and looks of outrage on the demon-hating populace. Hokage-sama, you can't be serious. You are being bewitched by the demon dash. Whatever the foolish man was about to say further was cut off by a kunai piercing his throat. Behind the man was Kushina, her hair waving about with a mother's anger as she pulled the kunai from his throat and shunshined back to her seat as the ANBU removed the corpse from the aisle. No one else had any protests that they were willing to lose their live for. And those who were not sure about Naruto being the Kyuubi looked down in shame. Now, since Naruto is not dash, a sudden vortex of black feathers shot up from the ground high into the sky overhead, gathering the attention of everyone in the arena. The feathers were rotating so fast around the vortex that no one could see what was going on within the eye of the tornado, but those who had known the person knew just who was behind the wall of feathers. After a full minute of roaring in the center of the stadium, the vortex died down, showing a teen who was dressed in black shinobi pants and an open vest with a chain mesh underneath. Unlike his old gray vest, this vest was a deep blue color. On the back of each shoulder there was an emblem, one for the Uzumaki and the other the Uchiha fan, separated by a black trident that went down his back. Naruto blew the traditional blank bang that hung over his eyes, and the sight shocked everyone as he opened his eyes. Because in place of his usual stoic azure eyes were two blazing red eyes with 3 tomo in each eye, the Sharingan. Sasuke's whole body started to tremble with anger as he looked into the eyes of his clan. How do you possess the Sharingan, Naruto? You are not an Uchiha. Answer my question, you bastard. Naruto raised an eyebrow behind his hanging bang as he looked into the 2 tomo copy eyes of Sasuke with the same bored look as always, but with the red eyes and spinning tomo added a hint of memorization. I awaken my eyes just like any Uchiha would. It is that simple. Naruto responded coolly, which only served to make Sasuke seethe with anger. Kagebooth, your boy has the Sharingan Hokage? How is that possible? You do not possess any Uchiha blood in your family. The elderly Tsuchikage asked, staring down at Naruto with wide eyes, never expecting to find the cursed eyes in the teen in front of him. It seemed the shinobi world still had surprises for the man who had met Madara Uchiha. Apparently he does. Was all that the yellow flash could manage to choke out as he slumped back into his chair, still in shock that his son possessed the prized eyes of the Uchiha clan. Yet here was his son wielding said eyes against the teen who was supposed to be the last Uchiha. Mei was simply staring down in silence with the rest of the stadium at the teen that caught her eye the day before when she finally registered what the fire shadow had said. Wait, apparently? Do you mean to tell me that you didn't know that Naruto had the Sharingan? Mei asked disbelievingly, a sentiment shared by the other Kage as well. Naruto is a very secretive individual. He says only what is necessary and lets out things only when he is ready. And if I try to force anything out of him, he will clamp up. Minato admitted with a frown as he looked down at his son, who had always been an enigma since his return. No matter what effort he or his family had made, Naruto had put up a wall to keep them a certain distance away from him. There is something going on in their family. From the way Naruto glared at him yesterday to the lack of communication between he and Naruto. Interesting, and if I play my cards right, I might be able to hurt Konoha and get a new ally. Not to mention Naruto is quite handsome. Mei thought, licking her lips at the last thought. You can't command around your own son. What a disgrace. I said through his loud laughter, taking a shot at his speed rival, ignoring the narrowed glare he got from the 4th leaf shadow to focus in on laughing at his incompetence. Oh yes, and from what I hear, you can only order your brother around when he is within arm's reach of you. Minato shot back, taking pleasure in the annoyed look and the instinctive hand clench from the hulking Raikage. After the barbs were finished, the booth fell into a silence, waiting to see the match between the 2 Uchiha. In the stands, Kakashi's own Sharingan was left wide behind his headband as he looked down at his sensei's son, who was displaying 2 of his own. Kekushina-sama, who does Naruto have the Sharingan? I didn't know there was Uchiha blood in him. We don't, or at least we didn't. Naruto never showed any sign of a dojutsu before when he was still around the family. When did he get those eyes? Kushina, just like her husband and the rest of the crowd, was left speechless at Naruto's new appearance. There was no denying what was right in front of their eyes. Asuma, getting over his shock, chuckled as he went to replace the cigarette that fell from his mouth when Naruto appeared. Man, that kid just keeps getting more and more interesting. Asuma had always seen Naruto in his childhood because he would often stay at the Sarutobi compound. At first, Asuma had felt envious of the young Naruto for having his father's attention, but that soon went away when he saw how bad Naruto had it. And since he had come back, the two often played shogi and talked with each other. Asuma had even given Naruto some advice on wind manipulation, combat field. Sasuke glared at Naruto, the two tomo in each of his eyes spinning around violently as his eyes responded to the rage he was feeling at facing down someone who disgraced his name. You dare to show me those eyes? You're a Namikaze, you are no Uchiha. I could handle Kakashi having one eye, but you have two. Sasuke shot forward, his speed improved from the last month, as he threw a quick punch straight to Naruto's face, not allowing Naruto to respond to his heated words. Naruto showed no sign of worry as he swayed to the left, avoiding the attack easily. Sasuke growled and threw another combination of body blows that Naruto was easily able to avoid thanks to the Sharingan. Scowling, Sasuke lunged at Naruto with a side kick that Naruto harmlessly brushed aside with the back of his hand. Sasuke was not done yet because he had spun with the momentum. Naruto redirected with a fist bearing down towards Naruto's face. Naruto glanced at the attack and ducked under the blow, lashing out with a kick that nailed Sasuke in the gut and sent him skidding backwards, heaving from the force behind the attack. Naruto stood there waiting patiently for Sasuke to attack again, not drawing twilight yet. Sasuke tried his best to glare a hole through Naruto's head, but Naruto was not bothered by his hateful gaze because he had become accustomed to such things. Sasuke kicked up his speed and appeared behind Naruto, taking use of Lee's shadow of the dancing leaf to kick Naruto high into the air, where he kicked up to hover over Naruto, who was coming quick. Performing a sudden flip in the air, Sasuke smashed his heel down on the back of Naruto's head, throwing him back to the ground. Just when Sasuke was about to celebrate his quick win, the Naruto he struck went up in a cloud of smoke, telling Sasuke it was one of Naruto's shadow clones. Looking around, Sasuke found nothing until he glanced up to find Naruto dropping an elbow on top of him. The Avenger managed to bring his guard up and lessen the effect of the blow. Naruto landed softly on his feet, brushing the dirt off his arms before regarding Sasuke with his Sharingan gleaming brilliantly in the sunlight. Naruto shook his head when he watched Sasuke drop into the Interceptor Fist Taijutsu style. Your combat style is reliant on your Sharingan, yet you are facing someone with a high knowledge of said style and more experience wielding the Sharingan than you. This is not a fight you can win. Naruto informed Sasuke with an even-keeled tone, not even holding arrogance, just truth. Sasuke growled at the Uchiha and the son of the Hokage for his slight at the difference between their skill levels. Let's see how you like the taste of an Uchiha's most useful jutsu. Sasuke shouted, going through the signs for the Uchiha's favorite fire jutsu. Sasuke leaned back as a burning sensation started to swell up inside of his chest. Fire release, Grand Fireball. Sasuke spewed a giant ball of flames larger than anything he had done before. Naruto watched the sphere of fire close in on him and preformed a substitution with the always-present log. Sasuke sneered when he saw a pile of ash that was not Naruto, with the man he wished to burn standing there with the same uninterested look in his eyes. Naruto stared at Sasuke with the normal intensive stare as he unfolded his arms from in front of his chest. Is that all of the firepower that you have? Naruto asked blankly as he looked at the snarling Uchiha across from him. Sasuke went through the same hand signs, except at the end of the series there was an extra hand sign that was not there before. Naruto arched an eyebrow, wondering just what Sasuke had learned from his time under Kakashi's metaphorical wing. Here, let me show you. Fire release, Dragon Flame Bomb. Naruto watched on in slight intrigue as the flames from Sasuke's mouth morphed into a dragon before swirling up into an elliptical blast of fire that raced out at the son of the Hokage. Naruto freed twilight from the bindings on his back and channeled chakra into the blade, making the white section glow a pure white and the black gleam menacingly. Naruto closed his eyes as the jutsu came closer to him and buried his sword deep into the ground in front of him, mouthing something quietly so that no one could hear what he had spoken. Kami no Ken no Mai, exile to hell. Sasuke watched as a sudden column of fire roared to life coming from Naruto's blade, absorbing his technique into the fire. The column was not done yet, however, as it shot up and started to spread. The stadium watched on silently as the one column of fire turned into a cage that trapped Sasuke and Naruto inside. Sasuke quickly tried to escape, remembering his time fighting Haku and how poorly that turned out, but the moment he tried to breach the cage, a column of fire roared to life in front of him, forcing him to step back. In the stands, "Whoa, I have never seen anything like that," Ino whispered out in admiration, momentarily forgetting her obsessive crush for the Uchiha brooder. Watching as the fire erupted at random times in a perfect circle, stopping every attempt Sasuke made to break free. Sakura looked on, nodding her head, since there was no way anyone could deny that the technique was impressive. Of course my Sochi would be kicking some ass. Kushina was absolutely beaming with joy at seeing her son handling her best friend and rival son with ease. Kushina pumped her fist ecstatically as she cheered for her son, getting a small smile from those around her. Kakashi had revealed his own Sharingan to try and recreate the technique, but to his confusion, he could not see how the chakra was being manipulated. "B-sensei, have you ever seen anything like what Naruto is pulling off down there?" Omoy asked his rapping sensei with the crutches he was issued lying across his lap as he watched Naruto's blade glow in the intense light created by the flames of his technique. "No, I haven't. This is something novel. That other Uchiha better figure something out quick or he is going to learn how to grovel," B replied, waving his hands around, eccentrically getting tired groans from those who were sitting around him for the second day, who had quickly become tired of his little gig. "B, sometimes I wish that someone would come around and break that jaw just to save me from your tortuous rapping," the Eight Tails said, irritably creating a depressing rain cloud to hover over Killer Bee's head, making even more people to look over at him like he was an alien species. Combat field. The Hokage's son looked at Sasuke as a wall of fire sprung to life between the two for a moment before falling, making Sasuke much more weary than before, while Naruto remained composed. "This Sasuke is a fire jutsu," Naruto said in monotone before snapping his fingers, which was followed by a fire pillar shooting up, catching one of Sasuke's arms in the width of the fire. Sasuke cried out in pain and yanked his arm away from the fire and leaped away. Looking at his arm, the Avenger could see his wrappings burnt away and skin slightly burnt after only a moment in the fire. Sasuke shook his head. He refused to be humiliated by Naruto in everything he claimed to be a genius in, and with that he pulled out a ninja tool from his pouch. Naruto watched as a Fuma shuriken flew past his side, but he could see Sasuke pull with mouth, making the shuriken loop back around. Naruto then felt his arms being pulled against his body by a ninja wire that was between Sasuke's teeth. Sasuke had suppressed the wire with chakra, which Naruto was easily able to pick up on thanks to his Sharingan, but let Rappin up anyways. Sasuke chuckled as he went through another set of hand signs for yet another fire jutsu, which Naruto waited patiently for. Fire release. Dragon fire technique. The flames made a beeline for Naruto, using the ninja wire as a conduit for travel. Sasuke watched as the fire made it halfway through the length of the wire before the wire fell limp to the ground, with the fire following soon after. Sasuke stared at Naruto for some sort of hint at how the wire had just cut and fell limply to the ground. "Just to let you know, Sasuke, my eyes pick up chakra, just like yours do, so trying to conceal the wire with chakra was very foolish," Naruto said, managing to pull off a blank yet still insulting tone of voice that had Sasuke scowling once again at his opponent and fellow Konoha shinobi. Naruto said nothing as he vanished in a shunshin, appearing in front of Sasuke and kicking him in the gut. Naruto sent a pulse of chakra from his soul, sending Sasuke into the air where Naruto had a shadow clone waiting. The Kage Bunshin gripped Sasuke by the top of his shoulders and slammed him back down into the ground, dispelling over the Avenger, hampering his vision, while the real Naruto came down with the foot of his shinobi sandal slamming into Sasuke's gut. Naruto ignored the feeling of wood under his foot in favor for searching for Sasuke, who substituted at the last moment. Naruto searched the area with his Sharingan but found nothing due to the chakra infused into the flames surrounding him. Naruto turned and went to retrieve Twilight, no longer needing to keep up his prison of flames. Just as Naruto went to reach for his katana, the sound of birds chirping echoed out in the arena. Sasuke sped through an opening with lightning-natured chakra coursing around his hand. "Chidori!" Sasuke shouted, using the fabled assassination jutsu of Kakashi the copycat ninja. As Sasuke's lightning-encased hand went to hit Naruto in the heart, the flames surrounding the two collapsed in creating an explosion. The crowd waited with bating breath, some of the civilians hoping that Sasuke had killed the demon while others just wanting to see the results. "Kushina?" Naomi and Narumi were all worried seeing how close Sasuke had gotten to Naruto before the fires collapsed in. Kakashi was busy explaining why he believed it to be the right choice to teach Sasuke that jutsu to his eternal rival. The wind blew away the smoke to reveal Sasuke with his hand thrusted forward and a look of complete shock plastered on his face. Sasuke's hand was touching Naruto's chest, but there was no lightning or an entrance wound, because around Naruto, the air was swirling around, frantically surrounding him like a set of armor. Sasuke pulled his hand back when it started to get cut up from the sharp blades the wind was creating. I created this move in case Kakashi decided to teach you his Chidori. As a counter, I created my Fujin no Yoroi, armor of the wind god, though I suppose if it was Kakashi using the jutsu my armor wouldn't be strong enough to handle the stabbing power. I assume I do not need to explain why your attack did not work. Kagebooth, that's my jutsu. The brat is using my jutsu. And enraged, I shouted, standing on his feet, glaring down at Naruto while lightning started to spark around him. Inoki looked over at the wreckage and shook his head, seeing he was still the same unruly brat as he was in his younger days. Now Reikage Dano, surely you're not saying that Naruto-san has actually seen your jutsu and managed to create a version of his own? Mei looked at the wreckage with a pleasant smile, getting the man to grumble but eventually nod and sit down. It would be ridiculous to think that Naruto would have met the wreckage enough to create his own armor technique. Besides, his armor seems to work different from yours. Whereas you create your lightning, Naruto seems to be pulling in the air from around him and manipulating it to shield him. The Kazekage offered his assessment, watching the winds wrap around Naruto as if he was commanding them to serve him. Then that would leave him susceptible to the Uchiha brat's fire release moves, would it not? Inoki mused, rubbing his chin as he looked down at Son of the Fire Shadow with a scrutinizing gaze. It was common knowledge that wind would only strengthen a fire's flames, so a well-placed fireball would mean game over. I'm sure Naruto knows of that obvious weakness, but the question is, did he find some way to cover that weakness? Minato surmised as he tried to rein in the pride he was feeling watching the jutsu his son had created from scratch. Minato really wished that Naruto would let them train him now. The potential he had was almost limitless. Combat field. What is that jutsu? I didn't see him even use one hand sign. Sasuke thought angrily, not being able to copy Naruto's jutsu, which frustrated the Avenger. If that jutsu is a wind technique, then it is vulnerable to fire. Sasuke leaned back as the burning sensation returned to fill his chest. Exhaling all at once, a massive ball of flames came forth directly towards Naruto. Fire release. Grand fireball. The fireball slowly started to shrink before it faded into flickers, then into nothing just before reaching the stationary Naruto. Sasuke stared, dumbfounded by what he had just seen happen to his ball of flames. Naruto sighed when he saw the confused look on Sasuke's face, and on most of the crowd's faces, as he wondered who surrounded him with so many morons. And that's my bad, Naruto. Fire is a living entity, and any entity needs oxygen. Fire needs oxygen to burn, and when you take that away, fire dies. Naruto said aloud, getting a spark of realization to spread across Sasuke's face. Did you really think that I wouldn't have a counter for such an obvious weakness? Your fire jutsu are not fast enough to take advantage of the relationship between our elements. Such a foolish thought. That voice came from behind Sasuke, making his Sharingan eyes go wide as he whirled around to face a closed-eyed Naruto. Sasuke moved to question the son of the Hokage when Naruto's body began to glow. Sasuke saw that all of his chakra was being pulled to the center and compressed. Before Sasuke could retreat, Naruto exploded, blasting Sasuke into a few boulders that were nearby, making the boy cry out in immense pain. The Great Clone Explosion, a jutsu only accessible to those who used the Kage Bunshin. A shinobi never allows an opponent to constantly get behind him, Naruto informed Sasuke while creating another shadow clone that stood at his side, glaring at Sasuke impassively with its own Sharingan. Sasuke stood up, panting while clutching his left arm that was now limp from the impact against the boulder. Sasuke tried to manage his best glare, but it proved to be ineffective since Sasuke was now standing on his last legs. I will now allow you to experience what it feels like to have the air sucked from your lungs. The burning sensation that spreads throughout your body is truly unbearable, Naruto said, motioning for his clone to go forward. The clone, armed with the Fujin no Yoroi, closed in on Sasuke and locked him in a bear hug, and Sasuke gasped as he felt the oxygen being removed from his body. Sasuke shouted for Naruto to stop, but all that came out was a mangled choke as that burning sensation flooded the Avenger's body. The clone, who also was suffering from the same oxygen deprivation, dispelled, giving Naruto the second-hand affects of being suffocated. Naruto winced momentarily, but the QB was quickly mending the damage done to his lungs. "Thank you." Naruto thanked his tenant, getting a grunt from the back of his mind. Naruto glanced over at Genma, telling him to call the match or else Sasuke would be more than unconscious. With just that look, Genma nodded while wondering just what Naruto would grow into as the medics came and took the revenge-obsessed Uchiha to the medical wing for treatment. Winner by knockout, Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha. That was the last match of the second day. Tomorrow will be the conclusion of the Chunin exams. Thank you for coming. Naruto spared one last glare at Senbon chewing Jounin for calling him a Namikaze before vanishing in a burst of black feathers, avoiding any unnecessary questioning. Review response. I was thinking that some form of mythical creature would also work for a second summon, but I want to stay away from another bird just so Naruto can have a variety. As for Sage Mode, I am not sure what or if, but maybe Hashiramas or from one of the summons, but that will be an issue for later. Salamander still remains a strong choice because yes, it is a way to take a shot at each Sannin, showing them a summon used to defeat all of them. His Mangekyo abilities won't be Kamui because Obito is alive in this story, and well, I don't want any few characters to have the same special abilities aside from the Susanoo. The Kodo Amitsukami, Shirsue's mind control Jinjutsu, is an option. Still not sure what abilities Suisei will gain. When the Mangekyo comes to life, I will get back to everyone on that later. But Naruto will achieve Susanoo and Amaterasu, that much is certain. Also, Naruto didn't use any Jinjutsu in this fight because his wouldn't be powerful enough against another Sharingan user. A month is not much in terms of training time, and remember, Naruto does not have all of the Kyuubi's chakra or even half of it. As was pointed in the reviews, and I am glad someone saw it, just because Naruto is courteous and civil with his sisters shows how strong of a personality he has to not throw himself to hatred like many Uchiha have, but he hates what deserves it. Parents, villagers, etc. As for the multi-pairing, as I will call it, I believe the number is hovering around 4 to 6. No, it won't ever get into double digits of even past 7 for that matter. I just won't do it. Yes, everyone, I will run through every fight since I believe every good story I have read doesn't solely focus around Naruto, it expands to the world around him, which yes includes others, and I am glad a few agree with that. There won't be an invasion since they're all 5 Kage there, but I will be adding events of similar magnitude, but not quite the same thing, but that will be in time.